Hello everyone. Welcome back to Motion Recaps. In today's video, we will narrate an action drama movie called Dune. Watch out for spoilers. The movie begins with a planet called Arrakis. The planet is rich in a substance called spice which people harvest from a vast desert. The Empire uses the spice as fuel for interstellar traveling while the natives use the spice as a hallucinogen. The Empire sent the ruthless House Harkonnen to establish order on the planet and to harvest spice. Some of the native people of Arrakis called Fremen made a resistance, and they were fighting against House Harkonnen. But one day, everyone from House Harkonnen left. Our protagonist Paul Atreides is sleeping in his bed. He is dreaming about an unknown girl on Arrakis. He gets up and heads out to have breakfast. During breakfast with his mother called Jessica, Paul talks about a ceremony that will take place later this day. The House Atreides is one of the most powerful in the Empire, and the Emperor wants them to go on Arrakis to make peace with Fremen. Today will be a special ceremony, where Paul's father will officially accept his duty to go on Arrakis. Jessica starts talking about the so-called voice, an audio neurocontrol mechanism that enables the manipulation of speech to achieve complete control over a receiver. Jessica tells Paul to use a voice on her. She moves the cup just a little and tells him that his voice wasn't strong enough. After that, we can see Paul reading about Fremen and Arrakis. He has a lot of interest in it. Soon a special ceremony takes place, and Paul's father, Duke Leto Atreides, officially accepts his duty on planet Arrakis. He tells everyone that he will bring peace and that the Empire will not have to worry about Fremen. As the ceremony ends, Paul goes to the airbase to see a soldier named Duncan, who will go first on Arrakis to meet Fremen and to establish a connection with them. Paul asks Duncan to go with him, but Duncan refuses because it's too dangerous. Paul then tells Duncan that he saw him in his dreams among Fremen, that he was like one of them. And after that, he saw him dying. Paul explains that he thinks that he will save Duncan if he goes with him. Duncan still doesn't want to take Paul with him, and he says that dreams are only dreams and nothing else. Paul then takes a long walk, and soon Leto joins him. Paul tells him that he wants to go earlier with Duncan, but Leto gives a lesson to Paul, telling him that he is meant to be a leader, and that he will go when he goes, and that he will learn to rule beside him. Leto also explains to Paul that the Emperor fears House Atreides and that he sent them on Arrakis to destroy them. Because of that, Leto needs to give his best when it comes to exporting the spice and making good relations with Fremen. That night Paul wakes up, and without a word, Jessica leads him into the room where the one old lady sits. Her name is Mother Mohiam. She is from the Order Bene Gesserit, and she came to see if Paul is strong enough to control his powers. She puts a poison needle close to his neck, and she orders him to put a hand into a box where he will feel great pain. Paul manages to withstand the pain, and Mother Mohiam is surprised. She congratulates Paul and then leaves. Before Mother Mohiam gets on an aircraft, she talks with Jessica, and she refers to Paul as Kwisatz Haderach. Then she leaves, and Jessica finds out that Paul was watching the whole time. He demands an explanation, but Jessica tells him that he could be the one. After that, we can see that House Atreides is leaving for Arrakis. Paul is saying goodbye to his planet, knowing that he will live on a planet full of sand from now on. Spaceships emerge, and their travel begins. On Arrakis, they are welcomed by a man called Thufir. There are natives gathered around, and they are starting to shout "Listen Al Gabe" when they see Paul. As Paul, Jessica, and Thufir get on an aircraft, Jessica explains to Paul that "Listen Al Gabe" means the voice from the outer world, and that people think that he is a messiah. Thufir then takes them to a city, and he tells them that the city is protected by the shield because of huge sandworms that lurk around and because of heat. Leto and his friend Gurney Halleck got into the city too. Leto instructs him to place soldiers in certain places as a defense. Paul is in his new room, and he is watching a holographic movie about Arrakis and Fremen. The movie narrator is talking about Fremen's walk. It's a special way of moving through the desert, which they use to avoid sandworms. Sandworms are attracted to the vibrations that repeat in the same rhythm, so Fremen move with a special pattern. Suddenly, Paul sees a little mosquito slowly approaching him. However, he figures out that it's a special weapon of Harkonnen's house. Paul manages to stop it with his powers, just millimeters away from his eye. Thufir's people then find a Harkonnen soldier bricked up in a wall. He was waiting for a long time there. He had tubes in him for food, water, and as a replacement for the bathroom. Thufir informs Leto, and he knows that Harkonnens will attack soon. At that time, Mother Mohiam is talking with the leader of House Harkonnen, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. And we find out that he is planning to attack Arrakis to destroy House Atreides. He also wants to take supplies of the spice again. Mother Mohiam asks Baron not to kill Jessica and Paul because of the Bene Gesserit. He promises that he won't kill them, and Mother leaves. However, Baron tells his servant Piter de Vries his plan to leave Paul and Jessica in the desert to die. Then he turns into a caterpillar from Jabba the Hutt. Leto calls a meeting to talk about extracting the spice, and he tells everyone that their equipment is terrible, and that the Emperor wants them to fail. Thufir then shows them the spice silos and other equipment. Everything is old and in bad shape. Then Duncan comes with his aircraft, and Paul is full of happiness when he sees Duncan. Later, Duncan tells them how he spent 4 months with Fremen. He learned about their history, tradition, and fighting. He informs Leto and Paul that Fremen lives in Syaches, and that there are millions of them. He brought Fremen leader Stigler with him to negotiate with Leto. The leader named Stigler comes in. He has blue eyes like all Fremen because of the exposure to the spice. Leto tells Stigler that he doesn't want to hurt Fremen. He wants to harvest spice in peace. Stigler tells him that Fremen won't attack them if they don't cross into their territory. Before Stigler leaves, he tells Paul in Fremen's language that he knows who he is. Later, Duncan gives a special compass to Paul, and he tells him about Fremen, that they are fierce and loyal people, and Paul enjoys it in his stories. After some time, Paul, Leto, and Halleck meet Imperial ecologist Dr. Liet Kynes. She is Fremen too, and she has their blue eyes. She will accompany them to observe the spice extraction. Everyone is wearing a special stillsuit that helps human bodies to survive in the desert. The suit cools the body, and it helps them breathe. Also, it extracts their sweat, and it filters it into clean water for drinking. Liet helps Leto and Halleck to adjust their suits, but when she comes to help Paul, she is visibly surprised to see that he managed to do that by himself. Liet asks him if he ever wore a stillsuit before, and when he tells her that he didn't, she says something in Fremen's language. They go with the company of 2 aircraft. They get near a machine that is harvesting the spice, and they see that a huge worm is coming towards it. Liet warns the machine personnel, and a special aircraft comes to get the machine out of there. But everyone is shocked when the aircraft malfunctions. Leto orders his company to get down there and to save workers. Paul gets out to help them, but suddenly, he starts to feel unwell. Halleck helps him to get on the aircraft. They go back with workers. A doctor named Yue checks Paul. He tells him that he was unwell because of the high concentration of the spice. Then we see Paul's vision where the girl with blue eyes stabs him. After that, we can see Jessica with a baby. Both of them have Fremen's blue eyes. Paul tells his mother about his vision and that he knows that she is pregnant. She is shocked by his powers. On the other planet, the Empire's elite soldiers named Sardaukar allies with Harkonnen, and they launch an attack on Arrakis city. That night Leto wakes up, and he sees light signals. He gets up and turns on his shield. He finds his guards paralyzed, and out of nowhere, a dart penetrates his shield on the back. It turns out that he was shot by Dr. Yue. Yue explains to Leto that he had to do it because Baron holds his wife captive. However, Yue gives Leto a false tooth and tells him that it's filled with poison and that he can kill Baron if he breaks the tooth at the right time. Harkonnens launch an attack, and Halleck leads the defense against them. Atreides' army is well trained, and they know how to put up a fight, but now they are overrun in no time. The city falls. Paul and Jessica are captured and taken to one of the aircraft. At that time, Duncan manages to fight some soldiers and escape by the aircraft. In the other aircraft, Harkonnens plan to drop Paul and Jessica into the desert, but mother and son manage to take control over the aircraft by using the powers of the voice. They land and run out of the aircraft, only to see the city in flames. In the city, paralyzed Leto is captured, and his life is in Baron's hands now. Yue, who betrayed Leto to save his wife, is killed by Baron. Baron then goes near Leto, who is trying to whisper something. Baron gets closer, and Leto uses the chance to release the poison by breaking the tooth. Everyone in the room drops dead, and Baron jumps on a ceiling. When his people come in, they see that he is alive. Paul and Jessica made a hideout in the sand, and because of the spice, Paul has another vision. This time he sees a huge battle and him in there with Fremen's blue eyes. He is killing the enemies, and his army is winning. After that, he has a breakdown, and Jessica barely manages to calm him down. And they get out of their hideout. They hear the sound of an aircraft. It's Duncan and Lyatt. Duncan tells Paul that Leto is dead, but Paul informs him that he has already sensed that. Duncan and Lyatt then take them to one of the Fremen's bases. There Paul and Lyatt are talking about the Empire. Paul tells her that he can defeat it, but Lyatt doesn't believe him. While they are talking, a group of Sardaukars sneaks into the base. They start killing Fremen. And Duncan locks Paul, Jessica, and Lyatt for their safety. Lyatt takes Paul and Jessica through the secret hideout while Duncan is fighting Sardaukars till his last breath. Lyatt tells Paul and Jessica that there is an aircraft waiting for them and that it only has 2 seats, so she will escape the other way. They split up. Paul and Jessica get on the aircraft, and they fly away. Lyatt runs to the open desert, and there she sets up a device for calling a sandworm. She sees a sandworm coming, and she gets ready to jump on it to ride it. Suddenly, Sardaukars show up, and one of them stabs her. Sardaukar comes to Lyatt to finish her, but she starts to hit the sand to call sandworm. She succeeds, and the sandworm comes and eats her and the Sardaukars. Sardaukars are chasing Paul and Jessica, but the son and his mother manage to escape into a sandstorm. There, Paul gets a vision, and he sees a man who tells him that he needs to go with the flow, and that he needs to let go sometimes. Paul does exactly that, and he lets go of the aircraft control. Sandstorm carries the aircraft for quite some time. Then, Paul grabs the control stick, and he manages to get him and Jessica out of the sandstorm. In the city, we can see that Baron is slowly healing in the mud. His cousin Beast Rabban comes in and he informs Baron that Jessica and Paul died in the storm. Baron then orders Rabban to kill all Fremen he can find. Paul and Jessica get into stillsuits, and they start walking through the desert. For navigation, Paul uses pictures from his dreams and the compass that Duncan gave him. Everything is going smoothly, and they have no difficulties until they step on drum sand and attract a sandworm. They start running for their lives while the large entity is hurling at them. They manage to get near one canyon, and the sandworm gets out from the ground, ready to consume them. But it hears a thumping sound, and it goes away. Paul and Jessica head out into the canyon. Soon, they are ambushed by Fremen. Stigler is there among his men, and he says that Paul can join them but that Jessica is too weak and that they need to kill her. Paul and Jessica put up a good fight. Jessica overpowers Stigler, and she puts her knife on his neck, while Paul gets a high ground to have everyone on his gun sight. Stigler tells everyone to put their weapons down. Then Paul meets the girl from his dreams. Her name is Chani. Suddenly a man named Jamis, the man from Paul's vision, tells Stigler that he doesn't agree with the acceptance of Jessica and he wants her to fight to the death with him. Paul tells Stigler that he will fight for his mother. Chani gives a knife made out of sandworm tooth to Paul. She thinks that he will lose and die, and other Fremen share the same thought. The fight begins, and it's really intense. Both Paul and Jamis are good knife welders. They are cautious and sharp. To everyone's surprise, Paul overpowers Jamis and puts his knife on Jamis' throat. Paul doesn't want to kill him, but Stigler says to him that those are the rules. Jamis backs away and attacks Paul, but Paul overpowers him again. But he doesn't want to kill him. Jamis backs away once again, and he attacks Paul. Paul then kills Jamis, and Fremen accepts him and Jessica as their own. Paul tells Stigler that he will help them, and they start walking through the desert. Chani is next to Paul, and she tells him that this is just the beginning. And that's it for today's video. If you had a good time watching it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more interesting movie recaps.